Hey guys, this is Gary, and this is part 2 of another Lightroom Photoshop Roundtrip editing session. This is obviously a portrait, and this is where we left off last week, so I can show you the before and the after. So I just wanted to say very quickly, everything that I've done in Lightroom to this image and pretty much every other image, I could have done in Photoshop. Do you need Lightroom to do these things? Absolutely not. No. Lightroom's feature set includes what I feel to be an indispensable file management, photo organizing system. As far as editing is concerned, while there's nothing that you can do in Lightroom that you can't do in Photoshop, and quite frankly, there's many things you can do in Photoshop that you can't do in Lightroom. The fact of the matter is, many of the tools available in Lightroom just do the job a little easier and a little quicker than doing the same thing in Photoshop. So the answer to the question really is it just saves some time. All right, so let's get to it here. We're going to bring this image into Photoshop. So I'm going to go Photo, Edit In, and I'm going to do a little differently than I did with the last video. You know, the one on the sky and the ferry and all that. And by the way, I'm going to put the name and link to that video up so you know what I'm talking about. But this time I'm going to go Open as Smart Object in Photoshop. And when I do that, it's going to open the image into Photoshop. Okay, there it is. But the difference is, if you look over here in the Layers panel, if you look at the thumbnail, the right lower corner looks a little weird. That tells me it's a smart object. And a smart object, as it pertains to a RAW file, allows for something that's very cool. So if I double click on this icon, it opens up the image into what's known as Adobe Camera Raw, or ACR. And it turns out that ACR has every single editing feature that's available in Lightroom. If I brought the object in as a smart object, I can then double click on it, go into ACR, which gives me access to all of the tools that I was using in Lightroom. So the point is, if I wanted to, for example, one of the things we did was we minimized the shadows under her eyes. If I wanted to adjust that, I could just grab the spot removal tool, and here are the two edit pins. So I have access to everything I did in Lightroom. That's just so cool. All right, anyway, so this gives us a little more flexibility. I don't know if we'll need to readjust anything that we've done in Lightroom, but the point is, if we wanted to, we could. Now, the idea is to fill in hair. And to do that, we're going to use the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to grab the tool, and right off the bat, I'm getting, when I hover into the image, I'm getting that international symbol for warning or danger, or you can't do that. Because when you have a smart object in Photoshop, you really can't touch the pixels. They're untouchable. So you can't clone into the layer you want to clone. All right. That's actually something you never want to do anyway. You always want to clone on a new layer. And the reason you always want to clone on a new layer is because if you screw things up and make a big mess, you don't have to start all over again, because all the cloning material is on its own layer. All right, so I'm going to create a new layer by clicking this icon down at the bottom of the Layers panel, second from the right, next to the left of the garbage can, and that's going to give me a new blank layer. I'm going to double click on the label and call it Hair. I could have gone up to the Layer menu and chose New Layer. Either way, you get a new blank layer. And the reason that this is good is because with the clone stamp tool, you have several different modes. You have current layer, and with current layer selected, the clone stamp tool will only sample pixels from the current layer, or current and below, which is what I've chosen now. And in current and below, what happens is the clone stamp tool will actually lift pixels from the underlying layer, which is the smart object, and then paint them on a new layer. And that's what we want, because we're using a smart object, yes, but also because you always want to clone onto a new layer so you don't screw things up. Anyway, so we want to fill in the shoulder here. So I'm going to make my clone stamp tool brush a little larger, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click right about here. That tells the clone stamp tool where to pick up pixels from, and then I'm going to come over here and start painting. And as you can see, to the left of the clone stamp brush that I'm painting with, there's a little crosshair that tells me where it's grabbing pixels from. So I'm just going to fill in hair as far as I can go. And now I'm just filling in skin. So, okay, there's some problems here. Like we have flyaways that are going across. It's very repetitive. You can tell it's been cloned because of that. But we can fix that. But before we fix that, I'm going to go back to this starting point up here, and I'm going to start painting once again to fill it in. Okay, so now you can definitely see the repeating patterns, and it looks very fake. So we need to fix that. Notice up here in the options bar, aligned is checked. If I uncheck aligned, the behavior of the clone stamp tool will change. So I want to explain what aligned actually does. So let me just create a new temporary layer just to show you what I'm talking about here. So I've got a new blank layer. I'm going to alt-click on her cheek, and then when I come over here and paint down, if you look over to the cheek, you can see the crosshairs. So basically it's doing what I said. It's basically lifting pixels from one area and putting them down in a new area. So when I start painting down, way down here, it's going to grab pixels from over here. In other words, when I alt-click on her cheek, I establish where the pixels are going to come from. The minute I start painting, I establish a relationship between the beginning and where the pixels get laid down, and that relationship will always remain true. So if I move down here, it's going to start painting over here. It's going to be the exact same distance from where I'm painting because I started up here and started painting here. So I'm just going to erase this stuff. So now I'm going to uncheck aligned. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to alt-click on her cheek. I'm going to come over here and start painting. And just like before, I've established a relationship, right? So no matter how far down I go, it's going to just track what I'm doing exactly. However, if I stop painting and then start again, look what happens. It goes back to the original sample point, and that's the difference. So if you want to keep grabbing pixels from the same area and painting them to different areas, uncheck align. So I can just keep painting, and no matter where I paint, I'm going to be painting her cheek, okay? Because the clone stamp tool is not aligned to the original location. All right, now that looks really bizarre. It looks like balls of skin are falling, and that's pretty gross. So I'm gonna erase that. Actually, I'm just gonna get rid of this layer. Okay, so hopefully you understand the difference between aligned and unaligned. And the reason I went through that little demonstration is because in order to get rid of the repetitive pattern look, we're gonna de-align the clone stamp tool. Okay, now that you hopefully understand the difference between aligned and unaligned, we can fix the repetitiveness by taking the mode of the clone stamp tool out of aligned. So we're going to uncheck aligned, and I'm going to alt-click, say, oh, I don't know, right about here. And I'm going to come over here and paint. This kind of breaks the pattern a little bit, right? So it's making it look a lot more random. Then I'll sample here and then paint down here. Let me go up here, and then I'm going to come down like that. So no matter where I paint, it's always grabbing it from the same area, right? So that, even though it's grabbing it from the same area, since I'm painting it in new locations, it very easily gets rid of the repetitiveness and gives us a much more realistic look. So this looks weird here, so I'm going to grab a new sample here and just kind of paint down next to it and get the flow of the hair a little better like that. See what's going on? Doesn't that look a lot better? I mean, like a lot better? Yes, it does, in my opinion. The trick is to use long strokes. Okay, there's a little bit of weirdness going on here, so I'm going to grab some hair here and then just paint over that. And then you get the idea, I think. I don't want to be too anal because we have a lot to cover here. All right, so that's not as good as I like it to be, but it's way better than it was. I'm going to go back to align. I'm going to make my clone stamp tool larger, and I'm just going to continue on here. Going to paint down like this and just, you know. Okay, so now I've got it in a much better state, but it still looks weird. So now this gets really tedious, but you have to do this kind of stuff, I'm sorry to say. I'm going to take my brush, okay, and I'm going to zoom into this area here because you can see it looks really bizarre. It looks like a wig. Well, we're going to fix that. But before we do that, I'm going to combine all these layers into one. I'm going to click on the hair layer and then shift click on the top layer and go up to layer, merge layers, and that merges all of that hair into one layer. I'll rename this layer hair. And okay, so if I hold down the Alt key, you can see that this is what we have. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take a brush. I'm going to take my eyedropper tool by holding down my I key, and I'm going to sample the color of the hair. Okay. So now I'm going to make my brush really small. Actually, let me zoom way in because I want to make it pretty much the width. See this weirdness here? There's a lot of weirdness going on. So if I make my brush really small, the width of the hair, and start drawing, I'm literally drawing in fake hair, right? But look what that does. It helps get rid of a lot of problems. So once again, I'm going to speed up the video because this is going to take a long time. Okay, there you go. So basically, I kept taking different hues of the hair by holding down the I key and selecting a different shade of brown, and then painting with this hair thin brush. And it's tedious. I'm not going to lie. It's very tedious work, but the results are worth it. That looks pretty natural. Still not as good as it could be, but I'm getting really bored, and I'm going to have to stop this video soon. So, okay, so that's not bad. Now, the flyaways. We have a lot of flyaways up here. And to fix that, we're going to do something else. We're going to create another new layer. Going to call it flyaway. Plural, flyaways. And I'm going to change the mode, the blending mode of this layer to darken. And I don't really have time to explain what that actually does, but you're just going to have to take my word for it for now. I could do a whole video on blending modes for sure. Maybe I will. I don't know. I need to be on the clone stamp tool, and I need to change its blending mode to darken, and I'm going to make it a lot smaller. So here's a flyaway. So once again, the flyaway layer is blending mode is set to darken. The clone stamp tool is set to darken. I'm going to sample an area right here, and I'm going to paint over that flyaway. And just like magic, the flyaway disappears, but the hair, the darker hair, is unaffected. Because in darken mode, it'll only darken the lighter areas of the shade that you sampled from and leave the rest alone. And since the flyaways are typically lighter because they're catching light, look at how that works great. And this is actually pretty, you can get rid of flyaways pretty quickly, I have to say. Okay, so big difference already. See where we've gotten rid of the flyaways. So you can just paint right over them. It's kind of amazing, and it works great. So again, I'm not going to do the whole thing because this video is getting really long, and I'm going to have to edit it down anyway, but you don't have to be all that super accurate either. It works great, I have to say. So, okay, there you go. So I'm being a little sloppy, but if I zoom out, you can already see a huge difference. Before, after. Huge difference, right? That's great. Okay, so last thing. This video is coming to a close because I have to stop.